Like any superhero-loving illustrator or artist, whenever a new superhero movie trailer drops, I pretty much always want to draw the title character, especially because superhero movies pretty much always give us a new costume for the character. The Spider-Man Far From Home trailer gives us 2 new costumes. Only gonna be drawing one today, but they're both pretty sweet looking. And I want to help other illustrators out because I'm sure there's lots of other people who want to draw Spider-Man in his new digs. So let's cut into the computer. What I'm going to start with is drawing a good front and back image of Spider-Man in his new digs. He's kind of moving around a lot in the trailer, so I pulled some reference images from the behind the scenes photos and used those to make a nice little front and back still shot. Boring, not super rendered, but at least it'll give us a good idea of what the new suit design looks like from the front and back. Once I've finished this, I'll kind of go over some specific differences between this suit and the Homecoming suit, and how I plan on rendering some bits of it, and some things about the color. This suit has a lot of similarities to the Homecoming suit, but there's some pretty obvious and some more subtle differences between the two as well. If anyone wants to use this image as a bigger, better reference than just looking at the video, I've put a download link in the description below so you can download it. Plus, you can download my inks of the drawing I'm going to be doing later in this video, the more detailed, cooler pose one. But you know, this front and back thing's taking a little while, so I think we can really just cut ahead a little bit. Here, let's do... So now we've got our front and back shot of Spider-Man, and he's looking pretty cool. I'm digging the new suit. Not a ton of changes between this and the Homecoming suit, but enough to be interesting, and definitely enough to analyze for doing some drawings. So the first and most obvious is that the suit no longer really has any blue to it. You can see I've actually colored it kind of purple in parts, and that's because the reference image I used, when I went to color pick out of it, the black part of the suit was actually a little bit purple. And the reason I decided to keep with that and stick to it, even though it might have been just because of the lighting, is the fact that there's kind of 2 sections of black on this suit. So there's the sort of shoulder and elbow and forearm bits, and just below the knee, and this part around the pec. That is a pretty solid black and has a bit of a shininess to it as well, whereas the rest of the suit that's quote-unquote black is a bit more meshy, and it wasn't quite as dark. I upped the amount of purple for this piece because I wanted to make it a bit more obvious. You can make it a bit more subtle, or you can just go straight black. I just wanted a little bit more variation in the suit. Other small things to keep in mind, his spider has kind of a white outline around it on his chest, whereas the one on his back is much bigger, though a similar shape, and is solid white, with a bit of a dark outlining around it that I didn't actually include in this drawing. From the front, you can see this red part on his forearm kind of looks like it would just be a solid ring around his arm, but if you look at the suit from the back, that red part actually goes down to his web shooter bit. So he does have more red on the underside of his forearms. He has lines in a bunch of the different sections of his suit in the darker bits that gives it a bit more detail. A lot of them were pretty subtle, so I kept them out of my drawing because I draw in a cartoonier style. If you draw more detailed, you might need to look at some other pictures to get a better idea of where those lines are, but really you can kind of just throw them in anywhere. So I ended up putting the 3 lines around his knees and his bicep because that's where the most obvious ones seemed to be, along with ones right along his just below his chest, running down, kind of lining his abs. You'll notice with a lot of superhero suits, a lot of the design kind of emphasizes where muscles would be. So there's a line emphasizing his pec and his abs, and even the upper muscle part on his back is emphasized by a little nook in that darker black part. I think that's all we really need to know. Again, this will be in the download link below. Let's get into drawing an actual cool poster of Spider-Man in his new Far From Home digs. I've said it once and I'll say it 1,000 more times before I die. I think Spider-Man is easily the coolest superhero to draw. I mean, he's got the most interesting poses, he's got the most dynamic form of movement, and there's even more possibilities with him in his movie suits because his suit can do all kinds of crazy things. Although I guess with this suit we don't actually know if it can do all the stuff the Homecoming suit did. It seems like it might have been made for him by S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, we don't even know if Tony Stark is gonna live through Avengers Endgame, so he probably couldn't make him another suit. In terms of poses, this is actually probably one of the less dynamic poses I've drawn Spider-Man in a while, but I really wanted to emphasize the details of the suit, so I wanted to make sure his body was kind of spread out, so he wasn't kind of bending and contorting and blocking big chunks of the suit with other parts of his body. All I really knew that I wanted to do with this one was have his hands sticking straight out toward the camera. I've been getting a bit better at drawing hands lately. It's still not one of my strongest suits, but I really like the idea of having a hand really close to the camera now that I'm getting a bit better at that. In terms of the inking, I didn't do a huge amount of variation. As I've mentioned in other videos, I do want to focus a bit more on line weight, so I made the hand a lot thicker and his backhand a bit thinner. That back arm, you can see it's a bunch thinner lines. I also end up adding in some random lining on the darker purplier parts of the suit, as I mentioned was a suggestion of mine earlier in the video. I've got the white outlining around that spider there. For Spider-Man's webbing, I do that on its own layer separate from the other inks so I can bring the opacity up or down, because with Spider-Man's Avengers franchise suits, the webbing is a bit more subtle than with, say, the Sam Raimi suits where the webbing was literally bumping out of the costume. So I like being able to control the opacity of the webbing later on in the piece if I want to make it a bit more subtle or a bit more obvious. Anyway, here are our inks for the Spider-Man piece. Now that the inks are all done, I thought I'd actually try something with this video. I don't know if anyone will be interested, but I've actually uploaded the inks in the description of the video, so if you want to color along with this video, or you want to just color it yourself, you can download that and print it out, or you can draw it digitally as I'm doing. However you want to do it. Either way, the inks are in the description for anyone who wants them. Now, let's get into coloring and shading. Now, with that background framing thing, that's kind of just a lazy background that I do sometimes, and I've seen some other illustrators use. If you don't really have time or don't want to do a background, you can just add a bit of a color gradient and maybe put some kind of funky shapes in there. I end up putting kind of light webbing in the background, and I think it ends up looking kind of nice, especially with the way I do the rim lighting on this piece. I make sure it's kind of blue to match the background. With the shading, I do more layers than I usually would. I think I did 3 layers of cell shading on this one using the same textured brush I've been using a lot lately. I also use a kind of lighter brush to do a bit of more painterly shading, but I keep that pretty light. There we go with the next layer of cell shading. I also end up adding that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse halftone comic texture because, as I've said in a bunch of different videos, it's just so cool looking. I really wish I'd thought of that before I did my actual Spider-Verse piece, because that video did really well, and I think it could have benefited from having that halftone pattern. Anyway, I've also started adding a bit more lighting to my pieces. I think it's been making them look a bit better. I also add even more rim lighting than usual to this one, throw in those webs in the background, which I forgot to do off the bat, and then just throw in that background, and we've got our finished piece. Wow. You know what? This piece wasn't actually that much effort for how happy I am with the result. I think this is pretty sweet looking. I might actually sell this as a poster or something. If you did end up downloading this and want to send it to me, I'd love to see how you colored it. Send it over to popcrossanimations@gmail.com or the Discord or the Facebook group. Both the links to those are in the description below. I'm going to be at Toronto Comic Con selling artwork. I don't know if I have any Toronto-based fans, but come check me out at that booth, which I don't have my booth number yet, but I'm sure I'll talk about selling art at Comic-Cons in an upcoming video. It's been 2 years since I did my last one, but I'm super excited for this one because I've gotten a lot better at drawing since then. Please subscribe. If you like this video, I'd love if you shared it. I'm really trying to grow this channel, but you don't have to. Just, if you like this video, it just helps me out a bit. Besides that, that's all for this week. I'll probably be posting another video on Wednesday. Maybe not, but I always post videos on Mondays. Either way, I'll see you in a couple days or next week. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm out.